Welcome to an incredibly special edition, midweek edition of Inappropriate, Earl. We got breaking news in the music community. We got the LA Kings fighting for their playoff lives. This man is the premier hockey reporter for the LA Kings. He is the best. So, there's a lot of bad bloggers and reporters in hockey. This man is number one, the Gretzky of hockey reporters. And he's a music lover, wrestling lover. We're going to talk XPW shows, for God's sakes, that were held in the Valley. Please, a very special, warm round of applause for the mayor, John Hoven.
Earl, with that kind of intro there, I would have come on a long time ago. The Gretzky of reporters.
But you do a great, there was guys from the past in the Kings history that, were kind of just ass kissers. And, when the Kings would not do well, they just kind of cover it up and, the team needs to play better. You get to the nitty gritty, but without being a dick about it.
I appreciate that.
Let's just say, with the Kings' problems right now, and the Kings, as of this recording, are down 3-0 to the Sharks. Game 4 tonight at Staples Center. And unlike most podcasts that I do, this will be released today, so it's current. Usually I just tape a whole bunch of them and release them down the road, so my friends are plugging shows that happened 4 months ago on the podcast. But, I would say, noticing the Kings' problems right now, that Robin Regier has the turning radius of the Titanic.
Well, the defense is certainly a problem, and that's something that, GM Dean Lombardi tried to address at the trade deadline by getting some help on the blue line. It didn't happen. And what you have is some really young guys in terms of Doughty and Voynov and Martinez, and you have some really old guys in terms of Robin Regier, a lot of mileage, there on Robin Regier, plus Scuderi being gone, and then you have Willie Mitchell, who's playing on probably one good knee. So it is really tough for them, and that's the key thing that they're missing. It all comes down to, in this series, not having a shutdown defenseman, in my mind. Forget the scoring. They don't have the defenseman that they need in the lineup right now, and that's why I think there'll be major changes to this lineup come summer.
And let me tell you this. I love Robin Regier. We had a very in-depth conversation at the Comedy Store where he was enamored with my knowledge of John Scott, because I was obsessed with just John Scott.
You obsessed with a hockey enforcer?
Yeah.
This is the breaking news, and this is why you need to release this podcast right away.
Oh, this is going literally... While you're in your car going back to Staples, this podcast will be released, and because I've always wanted to have you on, but you're unlike most of my friends, busy, working, making a living. Most of my friends are like, "Hey, can you come over?" They're like, "Yeah, what time?"
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you, I didn't get a chance to tell you this before you hit record, but we're going to become better friends because now that I realize how close you live, actually to the Viper Room and to Sunset Strip for the music festival. I hate parking down here during the Sunset Strip Music Festival, which is my favorite weekend of the year. But you have great parking, so Earl, I'll be back in early August for the festival.
Well, I think that the Sunset Music Festival is really missing the boat. I really think that what made the Strip are the hair bands. I really think that they should get, well, they're not going to be able to get Rat, but
we'll get into that, right?
Certain members, you get they can't get Quiet Riot either. They could get Frankie Banali and his 3 Mexican friends who are playing in it right now. Those bands made the Strip. And so I don't know why they concentrate on getting like Marilyn Manson or Korn or it's like, they had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, they've had some really weird selections, although they've been interesting to see and maybe even done nice sets. Like Bush. I didn't get the connection of why Bush was at the Sunset Strip Music Festival. When Ozzy played, okay, I kind of understood that. And some of the other bands, the Pumpkins are from Chicago, the Smashing Pumpkins, but it was great to see them, I guess. Motley Crue was incredible, but, where's Van Halen? Obviously, they've had a lot to do with the Sunset Strip Music Fest. The Red Hot Chili Peppers were going to be honored, but then they didn't play. It's just a lot of strange things, and they have a new management group that's taken over. Niederlander, I believe, is involved this year. So we'll see what that means for booking of the bands. But I'm just going to say this. I love being on the Sunset Strip at night so much. And it's always about being indoors, whether it's the Cat Club, the Roxy, the Whiskey, the Viper Room. But to be outdoors that Saturday and to be walking freely up and down Sunset between the Viper Room and the Roxy, it's just a weird deal with the food trucks out there and the 2 stages. I love it.
It's just, it takes you back as much as we can go back to that era. because I was, I lived here in that time frame. And so I had to drive through that anywhere I was going. And it was like an ant farm of horny dudes and whores and, cocaine.
And flyers.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
No MySpace. There was no internet, I don't think. So if you
That was Twitter. It was an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Yeah. That was Twitter.
But Sunset Strip was a virtual Twitter. I mean, you had Poison putting up their flyers, and then Rat would come by and put up their flyers, and Cinderella would, Warrant, and if I was booking Sunset Music Festival, I would be paging Richard Black right now and say, get Shark Island back together.
Okay. Now let's get your deal on your opinion on Cinderella. For me, I think they're one of the most underrated bands of that era. They were never as popular. They never sold as many records. They were never as big as Poison and some of the other bands that you've named there. But for my money, they were the best. Every single guy in that band is a musician. Just an amazing group of musicians. I think they're very underrated.
Oh my God. Still today, I mean, you see them live and you're like, wow, this band's really talented. Mm-hmm. And, I'm trying to get Fred Curry on the podcast.
Now, Fred does music for the Kings.
Right, which I love.
Okay.
Because the other night during a face-off, a Britney Fox song came on. And I'm like, okay, someone in the 80s is in charge here. And he had the best quote ever, I think, of any musician. And I told him this one night at the gay pavilions where I shop. He must live around here.
I believe so. Mm-hmm.
I said, dude, you had the best quote ever. And he's like, what's that, man? First of all, he came up to me because he thought I was Vivian Campbell.
Come on.
Yeah, it's just when I had my Kenny G hair.
I was noticing today, you're all cleaned up,
This is Metallica. I sold out.
Did you?
I've gone corporate.
Oh, that's not going to last long then.
I'm just trying to make it before I'm 50.
All right.
The clock is ticking. I'm like a pro wrestler. My clock is ticking.
Well, you're seeing a lot of those guys, though, still having success into their 40s. But back to the quote. What was the great quote, Earl?
I just want to be good enough to play on the albums.
That is a great quote.
And as like a 25-year-old, when I heard that, I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
And that was a real eye-opener to me that, then I started doing research on my favorite bands, and it was heartbreaking to find out that most big bands don't play on their own albums.
How crazy is that?
Like this is what I'm obsessed with. There was a black bass player in the Plasmatics by the name of Jean Beauvoir. And he was the bass player in Kiss on the studio albums in the 80s.
Did not know that.
And it was like, wow, a black guy in Kiss. Who saw that coming? There's
a big story.
Is
he alive? Is he available? That's a guy you need to get on the podcast.
Well, I have a problem with this particular gentleman because my ex-girlfriend, the great Shelley Berggren, she co-manages Motorhead, and one night at Long Beach Arena, it was Motorhead, Dio, and Iron Maiden.
It's a number of years ago.
This is it was a Dio. It was not a recent show.
Yeah. Ronnie was still alive, thankfully.
Well, the most impressive thing I've ever seen at a concert was, Motorhead was great. They did their thing, and then Dio came on, and everyone from Maiden, everyone from Motorhead, everyone left backstage to watch Dio sing. And it was just like, that's respect. Mm-hmm. When Lemmy leaves his Jack Daniels and a black stripper friend in the locker room saying, I got to watch.
Yeah.
That's like, wow. But the black bass player, Jean Beauvoir, was there. And after that night, we connected again. I gave him all these pictures to sign for me, and he never gave them back to me.
Oh.
These were rare pictures, so I know that mother effer sold them on eBay or something. It's like, and a lot of these guys. Now I know why they don't have fans. Why would you rip off your only fucking fan?
Yeah, well, they don't see the forest through the trees. It's all about today. It goes back to the reporting, actually. I mean, I can bring this kind of full circle for you. Is that,
please.
Some people are more worried about clicks on their website, or they're more worried about getting internet fame, today, and they're not looking at the big picture. So, there are a lot of stories that you hear in the locker room or talking to the players, and, I could put those stories out there today. I could probably write a book, but, that's going to prevent me from getting future stories. So it's all about building relationships with athletes and also with the people in the organization as well, whether you're talking about the marketing people, the PR people, or, whatnot. So it's not always about covering up and burying or being a spokesperson for the team or, that sort of thing. It's about building healthy relationships. And when you have that respect, they respect what you do. So it's okay to say something negatively about the team if it's fair and honest and balanced, and it's not just you out there shooting your mouth off to become the next, TJ Simers or, something like that. it's doing it in a constructive way. And certainly the Kings, when they've had their struggles over the last couple of years, they've given you an opportunity to question whether, it's their coaching or whether it's to question their forwards who aren't generating offense or things like that. But at the end of the day, I enjoy the people side of the reporting when it comes to athletes, because they really are people, just like you and I, and they have great stories.
Well, I mean, that's what I like about your reporting is it's unlike Fox News. It really is fair and balanced, and they are humans. Like, when I said the thing about Robin Ruggiero, that's a pretty shitty thing to say. I mean, here are the guys in the NHL for 15 years, and some schmuck is like saying, I'm kidding,
right?
But I'm sure you could release a book. I'm sure you've been not backstage, but in the locker room and seen some things, groupies or whatever. Maybe a player who's married sneaking off for,
I've never seen any of that, Earl.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying. You could be like Matt Drudge and release,
right?
The Hoven report.
Sure.
And
you have to question: do you want to be the TMZ of sports, or do you want to be something else? And you kind of have to set those benchmarks up there. And I think early on, when I had that fork in the road, I decided to go left instead of to go right because, like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't as important for me to get clicks and that sort of thing and build that sort of a reputation. To me, it was more about respect, and I felt that if I was respectful, that people would be respectful back to me, and I think that's why I was able to develop a lot of relationships with players, coaches, GMs, and all that sort of stuff. And pretty pleased so far, but still a lot of. A long way to go to get to the ultimate thing. Like you said, you want to make it before you're 50.
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, you've already
I
made
do too.
it.
No, come on now.
I mean, the world of stand-up is, there's a lot of, it's not, I'm from LA, so I thought, I'll just work hard. I'm starting to figure out that may not have been the best battle plan. But, I mean, the Kings are backs against the wall. I mean, it's I don't know how, 3-0, I don't know how they do it. I mean,
how they come back?
Yeah, I mean...
really, the way you come back is, it's a long list of cliches. So first of all, you have to believe in yourself. Second, you have to believe in your teammates. And that's one thing that this group has been really good about over the last couple of years is despite all the outside distractions, they fired Coach Terry Murray. They've gone through major scoring slumps. They've been out of the playoff race. They've had to claw their way back into the playoff races at different times. And, even being the 8th seed back in 2012, inside that room, they all love each other. They respect each other, as corny as that sounds. And they all believe in each other. And so even this morning at morning skate, the players, they're not down. The morale's not gone. They still believe that they can come back in this series and that they need to support each other and they need to believe in each other. And they do. And, kind of further down that list of cliches, you have things like taking it one game at a time. And that really is what it is. It's not about trying to win 4 games tonight. It's about trying to get one victory. It's been a challenge, but in each game, if you want to look at the glass being half full, they could pick out and say, we did this really well in this game. Maybe it was only for 5 minutes. Maybe it was for 30 minutes, but we did this well. Let's continue to do more of that. I also think the line changes tonight are going to make an impact.
Now, what are they going to be?
Up front, you're going to have Dustin Brown moving back into a top 6 role, which for me is very important. He's the captain of the team. He's the leader of the team. He sets the tone. And when he is on, he is one of the best players on that team. Very underappreciated and underrespected by certain pockets of people. But for my money, one of the best pound-for-pound captains in the National Hockey League. He moves back up. He's going to play with Andrzej Kopitar, and he's going to play with Marian Gaborik. I like that line. A couple days ago, I tweeted out the suggestion, and I thought that Carter, who normally I argue to keep him as a wing and not play as center, he's going to play at center with 2 kids in Tanner Pearson and Tyler Toffoli, a pair of kids that have a lot of chemistry together, playing in the AHL over the last couple of years, with a dynamic center down there named Lyndon Vey, who's still in Manch, of course. And so they're going to have Carter at center tonight. And I really like that line as well. I think it's going to give them a scoring threat that they haven't really had in this series so far. And down on the third line, you have 2 wily veterans and Jared Stoll and Justin Williams playing along a guy who's had a pretty good year after, I would say, a down year last year in Dwight King, a big heavy body who plays a good puck possession game. And you have strengths down the middle still on the fourth line. Mike Richards will be there on the fourth line along with Kyle Clifford and Trevor Lewis. So, you have kind of that more defensive oriented, skilled steel, grit, tough, however you want to describe that line. And we all know who's starting in goal, despite what all these weirdos on Twitter want to talk about. The starting goaltender for the LA Kings tonight will be number 32, Jonathan Quick.
I mean, I get, and that's what drives me up a wall when I listen to Kings talk after. You get these fans who are maybe slightly inebriated. I don't know how Nick and Daryl do it. Because
Nick is a saint, right?
I would have been fired from that job. Some guy called up talking about how, maybe we're a little slow on defense. Why don't we just get PK Subban next year? Like, this is not fantasy hockey here.
And you know what? That's actually become my favorite line this season, is talking to certain people on Twitter and replying. I'm like, dude, this isn't Xbox. Just stop it. Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's funny you bring up fantasy hockey, though, because it does tie into the Kings overall. People that really know this team understand that it's not about the number of goals that Dustin Brown or Kopitar or Carter score, because it's not fantasy hockey. That's not how Sutter and Lombardi have built the team. It's about how many goals have they scored relative to their teammates, because this team is built on defense first, offense second. They're not a run and gun team. They're never going to win a scoring title. They're not built like the Pittsburgh Penguins or some of the other high-flying run and gun. What was the old coach of the Atlanta Falcons? Jerry Glanville. Jerry Glanville, yeah. Jerry Glanville is not Daryl Sutter. So... Daryl Sutter is not Jerry Glanville. They're just not a run and gun team. So it doesn't matter how many goals they score. If they could win every game 2-1, that would be perfectly fine for the LA Kings.
Well, what I love about Jerry Glanville is every game he used to leave tickets for Elvis.
Isn't that awesome?
And, Sutter definitely, he seems like a pretty serious guy. So
you think?
I'm not sure if he's got the same expression: win, lose, win the Stanley Cup. And I like him, and I love Dean Lombardi.
How can you not like GM Dean Lombardi, right? I mean, Lombardi comes in and he has a roadmap and he has all these Excel spreadsheets with boxes and everything, and he tries to basically explain to the fan base what he's going to do. Here's my road. It's almost like he was talking to them, just like he sold himself to ownership during the interview. This is my roadmap. This is how I'm going to build this team into a winner. It starts with a goaltender, and then I'm going to get defensemen, and then I'm going to build for the, out to the forwards. And these are the players that we have now. Here are our boxes. These are how I rank them and I grade them, and I need these other players. And people, all of a sudden, he was so honest, people were questioning him. Well, wait a minute. What do you mean that guy's a C-level player? You're paying that guy $4 million a year. He said, well, that's the contract that he's under right now, and I had to pay him that, but he's a bridge player. He's only going to play for us for 2 years. People didn't understand why he signed Cloutier. But when you talk to him, he gives you all these reasons. He is like a mad scientist. And if you ever, go into his office and you see the whiteboards with all the things everywhere, the guy, he lives, eats, drinks, sleeps, breathes hockey. And all that guy thinks about is how to build a better winner. He is obsessed with the Stanley Cup. He might need therapy when he finally retires someday.
Well, I'll have him on this podcast, and we'll just let them all hang out.
That would be great.
But, he got a lot of shit for the Sharks, teams that he built, great regular seasons, not being able to finish. And, he came into a relatively bare situation here, and took him a few years, but hey, what do I know? I was a Sam McMaster fan, so.
Sam still shows up at the game every once in a while. He's doing some scouting, I believe, for the Nashville Predators, if I have the team right. And it's always weird to me when I see Sam McMaster up in the press box, just because my vision of Sam McMaster, like you, would be back to the days of the Forum and the Gretzky era and, all that sort of stuff. So it's just strange. Certain people that are still hanging around the game, like Dave Taylor is credentialed by the St. Louis Blues. That's strange to me. Dave Taylor will always be an LA King.
Oh, sure. But, that's like the dark era of the Kings.
McMaster?
But I think he gets, that's like the Kiss Crazy Nights era, where they were just grabbing at straws. But people, don't understand what McMaster had to work with, which was fucking nothing. I mean, the equipment companies weren't delivering because they had no money.
Right.
And this guy's supposed to get free agents. I mean,
right.
I know he wanted to sign Pat Verbeek for like $1 million a year. It's like, are you kidding me? We can't even get our sticks.
Right.
So I have a soft spot in my heart for Sam McMaster.
You should get Sam on the podcast.
I'm not. I would love to.
Okay.
Basically, people ask me, Earl, how do you get on your podcast? I'm like, you just show up.
You just find the parking lot and you're good to go.
You park in my garage right behind me.
I like it.
That's how I got David Arquette on the show.
It's funny you mentioned that because when I was watching your Twitter a couple weeks ago and I saw it, I go, really? He had David Arquette on. Now I thought maybe you ran into him at the comedy club because when we were at the Iron Sheik roast, he was there. Speaking of possibly inebriated, I'm not sure, but
might have been.
Might have been. But that was a great night.
Oh, of course. I mean, I was dressed up as the Ultimate Warrior. Rest in peace, James Hellwig, Warrior, whatever you want to, remember him by. Because they told me, listen, Earl, the Iron Sheik is so nuts that if you dress up as Ultimate Warrior, he'll think it's him. And
right.
I'm like, no, he can't be that out there.
Right.
And I remember walking in the back of the green room of the Comedy Store, which is a legendary green room because that's where Kinnison did coke and like Ted Nugent was back. And the Iron Sheik looks at me and goes, "What the fuck are you doing here, you piece of shit? I fuck you in the ass." He's very homophobic, the Sheik. Great guy, though. An amazing guy, but he's got some issues with the this community that I live in. And Brutus Beefcake was there.
Which to me was so weird. Was it weird to you? Like, you were kind enough to have me down there. I'm there, and I go up to the Sheik, and I want to get a picture. And I mean, I'm honored, right, to meet the Iron Sheik, and I'm hoping that he's going to go off on me, right? Just for the great story that I would be able to tell for the next 20 years. And he's so nice and polite, and he shakes my hand with both hands, and he wants me to sit down next to him and talk to him and take a picture and everything. And there's Beefcake with his fanny pack, and he's like bronze beyond bronze, and he has like a tight pink like a muscle shirt,
Under Armour.
Yeah, and I'm like, Brutus Beefcake, why are you here with the Iron Sheik? I could name 20 wrestlers that I thought would have rolled out for the Iron Sheik's roast.
Well,
Brutus Beefcake was not one of them.
Beefcake's wrestling schedule is like my stand-up schedule. It's wide open. A lot of open dates.
He had an opening that day. Okay.
And the day after. But the coolest thing, and it's like, I won't say it's one of the highlights of my life, is when I was roasting Beefcake. And I think my line was, "Brutus, you've had a lot of nicknames. Brutus the Barber, the Disciple, Booty Man, but one nickname you'll never have is Brutus the Good Wrestler." And he poured beer on me. And
some of your lines were, you went a little further than I would have, but why not? I mean, it was a once-in-a-lifetime gig, right?
What's the Warrior? And the Warrior, what I did was I had my girlfriend at the time bring out a table full of I think baking soda, and I simulated doing coke.
Yes, you did.
And then I had her unhook my shorts and put a hypodermic needle in my ass. And it's too soon probably, but let's be honest, we've been doing this podcast now for probably about 20 minutes, and probably 3 pro wrestlers have died. So
yes, it's you and I, we share a love for wrestling as well as UFC, I guess, as we've graduated into our older years into MMA. Of course, I know you like Pride as well, but it's always good to talk about Ultimate Warrior and all those days gone by, I guess. Too many certainly have died. My favorite growing up was Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. So,
I mean, another one who's not with us, and it's like I think the greatest promo, I don't want to say sketch, was the one where they had Mr. Perfect doing everything.
Right.
Like, he would throw the football, and then they'd show him catching it.
Right.
And apparently everything in that video happened but the football. Like, he would throw a basketball and it would go in, and I think there was some other like horseshoes.
Right. He was just a natural athlete. Just ridiculous.
It's like, Roddy Piper comes up to the store a lot, and it's so sad. Like, he loves us all, and he's Piper. He's like a top 5 guy of all time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely probably the number 1 heel ever. And,
well, I mean, you have Ric Flair. I mean,
But I mean, Flair, I guess Piper was a good guy too, but I mean,
no, Piper definitely is known more for being a heel, absolutely, than being a face.
But it's so like sad to talk about the old matches he was in, and you realize that, wow, every guy I've mentioned is dead.
Right.
It's like when I was talking to him about Rick Rude, who is my favorite heel.
Oh, how do you not like Rude? Yeah, of course. He was incredible.
I mean, just the whole I'm thinking so much of buying a pair of his ring-worn pants on eBay right now for $1,400.
Earl, you don't need them. You were kind enough to take me into Capone's vault up there, which, according to you, only a few people have been witness to, and to see hundreds of thousands of dollars $1,400 worth of hockey jerseys. I love Rick Rude, but I don't think you need to spend $1,400 on a pair of his pants. Just go get those jeans airbrushed and call it a day.
But they're the best. They're a pair of teal ring leggings, I guess.
Right. Does he have the Intercontinental belt on there, though? You have to have the Intercontinental belt.
No, it's even better. It's on each leg is a pair, is one female hand going up to the crotch area.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, I was a little nuts on some of these jerseys I have upstairs.
Yes, you were.
It's ridiculous. And now I don't even wear them anymore.
Well, okay, so if you buy these pants of Rick Rude's, you're going to wear them?
I might wear them for a special show.
Okay.
But, the reason why I don't wear the jerseys anymore is I did a show for Barry Katz, who is the creator of Last Comic Standing. And there was a show called One Night Stand Up. And long story short, it was a dating show where the girl never saw you. She just heard your act. And it was at the Comedy Store, and it was packed house. And I thought this is right around the time of the Duke lacrosse case. So I was just about to go on stage with a long bomb joke right out of the gate. And I had a hockey jersey on, a Matt Barnaby jersey. And Barry Katz grabs me by the shirt and goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You can't wear these on TV because of the logos." So I had to perform in an Affliction shirt that I had on underneath.
Okay, this podcast is over. You were wearing an Affliction shirt.
I don't know what I was thinking.
I'm done, Earl. What?
I bombed so badly that night. Because my first joke was about the Duke lacrosse case. Because if you remember, that was the case where the two black dancers said that the whole lacrosse team raped her. The captain of the lacrosse team had a degree in economics. So my first joke was, "Hey, if anyone knew 47 didn't go into 2, it was that guy." Nothing
in the room?
But my friend David Taylor, who's a very brilliant comic, but he's very dark. I mean, he's into some real dark jokes. And I like, oh, wow, if he's the only one laughing, I'm in trouble.
Well, I thought that was a good opener.
Well, in hindsight, not a great joke for a dating show to do a gangbang rape joke.
Oh, well, okay. That timing is everything, and that might have been the wrong timing.
Well, then the second joke was even worse because I got so scared. I'm like, well, I'm going to do my blacks in hockey joke, which is a harmless joke about, hey, no one knows that there's over 70 black players in the NHL because they all have white names. They have names like George Larocque, Donald Brashear, Fred. I mean, wait.
Freddie Brathwaite?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's just Fred?
Number 4. Yeah, Brathwaite could sound semi-African, so I thought I'll just say Fred.
Fred.
Nothing.
Well, since you love just, going off in different directions, I will share with you. Among my many travels, seeing hockey all across North America, one of my favorite stories is going to see the Kings play the Oilers up in Edmonton. Obviously, this is a number of years ago when the players were involved. But Freddie Brathwaite and Jason Arnott were playing for the Oilers at the time. And after the game, some friends and I decided to go over to local watering hole to have a few post-game drinks. And who was behind the bar tending bar that night after a big win from the Oilers? It was Jason Arnott and Freddie Brathwaite. And to me, they will always kind of be elevated a little bit up above some of the other players because, they had two jobs. They're doing double duty. Not only were they National Hockey League players, but I guess bartenders on the side as well. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, he was a very good goalie.
He was serviceable. I mean, he was a good backup. I wouldn't say he was a, starting goaltender in the National Hockey League, but he was certainly a serviceable backup.
I mean, he was no Pokey Reddick, but I mean...
Okay, you're getting all geeked out on me now. Are we going to talk Fuck You Fuji and some of these other guys too?
No, Pokey. Well, this is breaking news, by the way. But by the way, Pokey Reddick was a black goalie for the Winnipeg Jets primarily. He had Jerry curl. It was a great visual.
Because nothing says Winnipeg like a black goalie.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been to Winnipeg.
Okay. Now let me ask you. I've been to Winnipeg too. It was Gretzky's final game ever was in Winnipeg in 1990s.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, well, a little side story then. So doing a trek through Western Canada, we ended up in Winnipeg. Two things about that. One is that we had 2 days off between games. So we said, let's go check out a junior game. So we're going to go to Brandon, which is about 2 hours away. When you get 5 minutes outside of Winnipeg, it is nothing. It is just completely flat. It's barren. There's snow on the ground. It was white for as long as we could see. We were absolutely freezing because Winnipeg is the coldest place ever, right? And for those that can't see, Earl is like shivering and nodding his head.
Brutal.
So we drive 2 hours. We get to Brandon. It's freezing cold, and outside of the arena in Brandon, everybody is either smoking or eating ice cream, which I guess when you're freezing cold, those are the only two things that you can do. Awesome game, though. Brandon Wheat Kings versus the Tri-City Americans. I think there ended up being 8 players in that game, if I remember correctly, that were taken in the first round. That's a pretty good junior game right there. Wade Redden was kind of the biggest name. Yeah, it was an incredible game. And then back in Winnipeg there, because Winnipeg was leaving. This is a story that you'll appreciate. You know, they do the game used, the auctions, you know, for charity in between the...
I know.
Yeah, I know you know, right? So this is my favorite thing about that game there. So Winnipeg's leaving. They're selling off the building. They're selling everything, you know, try to last cash grab, if you will. Keith Tkachuk's pants, game used and autographed pants, sold at the charity auction table that night for... $75. I just thought, no wonder why your NHL team is leaving town when Keith Tkachuk's game-used pants sell for $75. A 500 goal scorer, the National Hockey League. Not at that point, but of course, I mean, he would go on to be. So, that was Gretzky's final game. It was awesome. Went to the practice or the morning skate earlier in the day. Everybody kind of started to know that something was about to go down soon. And, you know, Yari Curry was still there and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And Gretzky was mobbed by the media in Canada anytime the Kings played up there. But at that particular time, it was really starting to heat up that he was probably going to be leaving. So played the game that night in the old Winnipeg arena. We flew home the next day on 2 separate flights. I flew commercial, and of course the team flew on a private charter, I would imagine. We landed at LAX within about 30 minutes of each other, and there was a press conference held basically immediately that saying that Wayne Gretzky had been traded, and that was the end of that. You know, 2 weeks later, he came back with the St. Louis Blues, and I remember I've never had a feeling like that sitting in an arena. It was the weirdest feeling being at the Forum that night, watching him skate around in his St. Louis Blues jersey after all those great things he did for the Kings organization for 8 years before that.
Well, I mean, that was, I think that was a McMaster trade.
He may have been the GM at the time, but that was really, let's call it what it was. It was a Wayne Gretzky move. You know,
oh, sure.
You know, Gretz did what he wanted to do, and he orchestrated that to go to St. Louis to play with his friend Brett Hall. And it's kind of funny because only diehard hockey fans really know that. The casual hockey fan still thinks of Gretzky as either being an Oiler, a King, or a Ranger, of course. Kind of like Reggie Jackson, I guess, maybe playing for the Oakland A's.
Or Dave Parker playing for the Milwaukee Brewers, the Cobra. By the way, just a completely side note, Dave Parker's nickname was the Cobra, and he was my favorite player as a kid, and I always thought it was the way he would wiggle the bat, you know, as he was batting. Apparently he had a huge dick, so, you know, it's just something, not King Cobra, just Cobra.
Glad that you worked that into the podcast, though. We needed to know that.
But that's why it's called Inappropriate Earl.
Okay.
You know, like when Tawny Katane was on, I asked her about O.J. Simpson.
Get out.
And that was the only, Tawny Katane was, first of all, she was amazing, looks beautiful to this day. And that was the only gentleman from her past that she wouldn't talk about. And I respected that.
You had to.
She didn't even want to mention his name. I'm like, who don't you want to talk about? She's like, you know who. I'm like, no, I don't. And she's like, you know who, Earl. I'm like, let me just ask you this. If you're ever in Florida, I hear the orange juice is amazing. And he's like, yes. Moving on. Well, let's take it to Tommy Lee, Tawny. And so speaking of Winnipeg, I was there with Rob Schneider playing their comedy club, great comedy club. And as you mentioned, it is ungodly cold there.
You can't explain to people how cold it is unless you go there.
It's on such another level. And I went to walk to the mall outside of our hotel. There's one mall. It's Park something. And I'm standing on the street corner. I literally have 2 pairs of pants on. I have a pair of just regular pants, sweats over the pants, 2 sweatshirts, and a jacket. And there's a guy in the corner in flip-flops and shorts.
No, there's not.
On my witness. Obviously a local. Yeah. He looks at me and goes, "Where are you from, man?" I'm like, "LA." And he just starts shaking his head going, "Pussy." And I could not argue with him. Right. It was -5. This guy's in flip-flops and shorts.
Something's wrong with him.
But I don't think I've ever been in a city that's more hockey mad than Winnipeg. I mean, it was so neat to be, that whole city revolves around hockey. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I checked into my hotel, which I guess is where the teams, I think is where the Kings stay, and there was a jersey on my bed with my last name and number on it.
No way.
Made for me. It's like I mean, it was just so mind-blowing that they, all the hotel employees wearing Jets jerseys. You'd go down to the bar, Jets jersey. I mean, it was just awesome to be in that kind. Like, King fans, I think, are great and underappreciated. I think they're like Motorhead fans. Like, they're smaller in number but they're more knowledgeable than most fans.
And that's you're absolutely right. I think Kings fans are the most knowledgeable of all fan bases in Los Angeles. If you were to compare to Lakers, Dodgers, Clippers, or whatever, Kings fans are incredibly knowledgeable. But I do want to get back to Winnipeg real quick. Talk about how hockey crazy they are. Took that trip over to Brandon. Across the street from the arena, there's a McDonald's. Go through the drive-through there. They have a hockey hero meal, which was like $5.99. And what this was, it was, fries and a Coke, but the burger was a McRib bun, so it's elongated, with 3 cheeseburger patties on it. That's the hockey hero meal. And you get with it as a prize, you get signed wooden hockey sticks from the junior team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so forget the Disney toys. You get little mini hockey sticks signed by the entire team. So like Wade Redden, the kids in that neighborhood would have had him on a stick. I mean, that's a pretty cool prize if you're a kid.
Try doing that at Staples Center at McDonald's. Right. You'll get shot on Broadway. Well, I don't think it's kind of a dirty secret, I think, of Staples Center area. If you go like a couple blocks east on Broadway, it's Skid Row. So, I mean...
There's a revitalization that's taking place, I think, all throughout downtown.
They better hurry on Broadway.
Well, all throughout downtown. It's a lot better now than it was 10 years ago.
Oh, my God, absolutely. I mean, but I don't think people realize 10 years ago, or when was Staples open? 99?
99, yep. Bruce Springsteen, 4 shows. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, he was, or that area was not, it looked like a set of The Wire. I mean,
LA Live was a parking lot, which is even, it's really funny because when Staples first opened, I parked where essentially like Yard House is today. That was my parking lot.
I think it was lot 4. And, it was like so convenient just to park there and walk across.
If you got there early enough and you parked at the front of the lot, you literally just walked across the street and you were 10 steps into the arena. I mean,
it's amazing.
The best parking ever.
What they've done to that area. I mean, just I don't even LA Live's in the Kia Theater and the Yard House and the sushi places and
Now, Earl, speaking of LA Live and Nokia, where were you last night? I'm at the Revolver Golden God Awards, and I thought if there was ever a show that I would run into you, I mean, I know I run into you at some of the other shows on the Sunset Strip, but Guns N' Roses was headlining last night, and they played for over an hour. Absolutely amazing. Duff was back with the band. Where were you?
Last night I was doing a show in Montebello, headlining, where I got paid in Uber coupons.
Outstanding. What's in Montebello? That's off the 60. I know. Yeah, I know where it is.
Deep. I was in the VFW section.
Okay.
Very few whites. And, I'm not. To me, it's not Guns N' Roses. I know.
I will respect that.
I contradict myself though because I still go see Kiss, and Kiss is basically the Jewish Menudo now. I mean, with how they.
No, come on.
And I'm friends with Eric Singer.
Come on.
Yeah, and I love Tommy Thayer from his Black and Blue days.
Tommy is an amazing guitarist.
But with absolutely, and Bruce Kulick is an amazing guitarist. I'm incredibly partial to the great Vincent Cusano, who you might know better as Vinnie Vincent.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about this, though, Earl. I'm a little confused here. So, Kiss, half the band is there. It's Paul and Gene, of course, and then these other guys in makeup. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, only for the purpose of the conversation. Love Kiss. Just saw them out at San Manuel for their little acoustic deal that they did after the whole debacle from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Love Kiss. Ace Frehley was there last night, actually at the Golden Gods. Had a chance to talk to him for a few minutes. That was outstanding. But you'll go and see and support that. Kiss, the new Kiss, 2014, but Guns N' Roses, you can't do?
With Duff, I might have gone, that would be cool to see him. I just, because I'm a big fan of his.
How can you not be?
Yeah, he's great. And
Duff is amazing in every band that he's in, right? He has Walking Papers, his band Loaded. Yeah. He's been involved with the Velvet Revolver. I mean, everything that guy does is awesome.
I just, with Guns N' Roses, those original 5 guys, much like the original Kiss, they just had a hunger and a dirtiness. And,
Yeah.
And it's nothing against the guys in DJ Ashba.
Yeah, DJ's great.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. Now, are you familiar with his previous band, Beautiful Creatures? Amazing. Yeah, they played the Strip for a long time.
Oh yeah,
I think I blew his mind when I mentioned Beautiful Creatures last night.
Well, yeah, most.
He just kind of looked at me like, okay. How do you know about Beautiful Creatures?
Well, it's like when I was at I don't want to. I guess I was at Equinox working out, and Fred. This is the most random thing. I had an Arcade tour shirt on.
Okay.
Now, Arcade was the band that Fred was in with Stephen Pearcy in the early 90s. You talk about a band that just hit the scene too late. Great band. And Fred Curry stopped dead in his tracks. And he's like, where did you get that? And I got into his face like a UFC poster. I'm like, 94, the Forum, Bon Jovi, merch booth, outside Colonnade, section 24.
That's outstanding right there.
And it was literally the only Arcade shirt at the merch booth. Not the only style. It was literally
the only one?
One shirt.
Well, fortunately, the size was okay.
It's perfect.
It didn't matter. You were going to get it. You were going to wear it.
Bon Jovi had like very Kiss, 100 different style shirts, the baseball shirts, long sleeve shirts,
right.
Women's shirts, toddler shirts, transgender shirts.
They were even doing the toddler shirts back then. That's good to know. Richie Sambora was at the show last night too.
Well,
where were you?
I just, I don't know. I
just didn't resonate with you, huh?
It didn't.
Okay.
I think I was psychic. Those of us in the rock and roll community, very bad news today. This is breaking news on Inappropriate Earl. Given to me by Stevie Rochelle at Metal Sludge, who, by the way, is the responsible. I never thank him for doing this. He is responsible for the soundtrack to Inappropriate Earl. His band Tough, which was, Poison Light, provides the music for this show. He broke the news that the great Stephen Pearcy has left Rat.
Again.
After, he'll be back. Back for more, as they say.
Nice.
30 years. Well, Bobby Blotzer posted something maybe that he shouldn't have. If you watch the show Big Brother, as I know you do and I do, one of the contestants is a big metal guy named Evil Dick. And he got beat up or something and posted the picture of it. And Bobby Blotzer posted, gee, I wish this would happen to my lead singer. And I think that was enough to I don't know what goes through, like we were talking earlier, what is Pearcy doing leaving Rat? Maybe he makes more money on his solo shows. The ins and outs of the business.
I can't imagine that he makes more money on his solo shows. I mean, he might get a bigger piece of the cut, but the pie is smaller because there are more fans coming out to see Rat, let's be honest, than there are going out to see a Stephen Pearcy solo show.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, my favorite Stephen Pearcy solo show I ever have seen, and I've seen them all, because I'm just a fan of his. I know he gets shit on for his vocal stylings, which, he's not Pavarotti. But
I have no problem. I mean, I like, to me, Pearcy is just rock and roll. He lives it. He is rock and roll. That's all he wants to do. That's all he's focused on. And he loves his racing too. And even when he's involved in different racing operations, it's really more about promoting the music. He's a rock and he's like Lemmy. I mean, I know people are going to, maybe take exception to that because Lemmy's considered to be an icon and Pearcy certainly isn't, but they're just certain guys that rock and roll is all they are. It's all they do.
Yeah, I mean, he, I just respect that he still does. He puts on a good effort from what I've seen at his solo shows. He gets kind of shit on because, I think a lot of people don't realize that Rad at one point was a pretty big band. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people say because of Pearcy's laziness or maybe lack of showmanship on stage, Rat took out Bon Jovi first. They took out Poison. And then these bands kind of leapfrogged over them tenfold. And a lot of people blame him for maybe not being the most charismatic front guy.
I always looked at it more that they weren't poppy enough to really cross over. Poison had that pop element to them that allowed them to cross over. It was the same thing with Bon Jovi, a little bit more pop. I mean, Rat was always, to me, a little bit dirtier. They were a little grungier, for lack of a better word. No, I guess it's an interesting word considering how it all played out, with hair metal's demise. But they were a little, they had more grit to them in terms of rock and roll.
I thought they were the best band musically from that era, in terms of the musicianship. I mean, Juan's a great bass bass player.
He's a good Blaze player too.
Yeah, Blaze. He's a blazer. Piercy's a great Blaze player. And DeMartini, I think, is criminally underrated.
I totally agree with you. He's amazing.
You know, I don't think I've seen many guys like him who every solo for every song fits the song. You know, like I brought up Vinnie Vincent. You know, every solo he does doesn't fit the song. It's
right.
Like, okay, we get it. You can play, but you know, maybe let the vocals kick in. And Robin Crosby was a good rhythm player, and you know, I think Blotz is probably the weakest part of the band, frankly. So I wish he would have left.
That's not nice. Come on now, Earl.
But I mean, this is like when we're analyzing the Kings.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you're very diplomatic in your evaluations. Maybe I'm not. So
there are
much.
a few guys that I think could leave the team, and that will leave the team and be replaced this year. So I can relate to what you're saying. Sure.
I mean, I'm guessing.
But what you're saying is more because you'd rather have Piercy still in the band
because he's the voice.
Yeah. And where do you fall on that? I've had this discussion with many people. If a lead singer is replaced, is that really the end of the band? I mean, because isn't the lead singer, with very, very few exceptions, isn't the lead singer really the band?
I mean, with Rat, I would say it's 100% the band. I mean, they had Jizzy Pearl.
Who's actually good.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah. I mean, Love Hate.
Love Hate.
Yeah.
I think L.A. Guns, he was in for a little bit, but I think I've been in L.A. Guns. They've had
well, which one were you in? Because there are two.
I was in L.A. Buns.
No, that was your movie career. That was different, Earl.
But that was Benchwarmers in 06, and that's it. These shoes were actually stolen from the set of Benchwarmers. But that's another, we won't get into my movie career.
It'll be in volume 2 of the podcast.
Well, people ask me, they look up my name on IMDb, and they're like, Earl, we've seen you done one movie in 2006. I'm like, yeah, I take my time.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not Stallone in the mid-'80s. You just see a 2-hour movie about arm wrestling fat guys, I'm in. Not even a fucking hesitation.
So the next movie for you is coming out in a couple years then. You're taking your time.
This is breaking news here. It's I've through several rich friends, I'm financing my movie about hockey and pornography. We're doing still photography for it right now in the Valley. It's called Two Girls in a Stanley Cup. And,
okay. Is this a real movie or is this part of your new stand-up? You're just working out a joke here.
No, it's Two Girls in a Stanley Cup.
Okay.
At the IMAX. Although I am writing a hockey movie, and I shouldn't say this because someone could take the idea.
Well, then don't say it.
But I want to because it's like, I don't, you know, I think it's such a great idea. It's called Black Ice. And I know hockey.
Wasn't that a beer by Anheuser-Busch a few years ago?
Well, you know, there might be some copyright infringement possibilities here.
All right.
But, you know, it's going to be a movie in the vein of like Porky's, inappropriate comedy, and it's about the first all-black hockey team to win the Stanley Cup. And they're going to be coached by a white supremacist.
Okay?
Because here's the hook of the movie, and you're in the business, you know people. Maybe we could get Matt Berry involved in the casting.
Oh boy,
it's possible.
Well, he'll. But if Matt casts the movie, he has to be in the movie. So
that's fine.
You have to make him a trainer or something.
Because my first choice as the white supremacist coach is Rob Schneider, because I'm loyal.
Your younger, smaller brother.
But I don't think that Rob's going to be down for the first line he has to say, which is, here's the premise of the movie. Opening credits, Black Ice, directed by Earl Skakel, starring Rob Schneider, and you get a floor-level camera shot of the doors of the ice rink opening, and you see a pair of Chuck Taylors walk on the ice bouncing a basketball, because in the movie, you have a minor league basketball team. Their team folds. They have to find another job. They have no job skills other than their athletic abilities. They're too scared to play football. They're not good enough to play baseball. So one of them says, hey, how about hockey? They know nothing about the sport. So they start with a hockey team. They need a coach. The coach is a grand dragon of the KKK. He just got fired for his lack of money-making abilities. He looks in the paper, hockey coach, thinking, great, I'll coach a bunch of white guys. He's on his cell phone. He walks in the locker room the first day, opens the door, and he's on the cell phone, he's like, I'm just glad I found a job where I don't have to deal with And then he opens the door to, 20 black guys.
This is what you think of in your spare
Absolutely.
time?
That's
Okay.
just the first scene.
That's it.
That's all I got, to be
Okay.
honest with you.
Well, you might want to develop that storyline a little bit better. Yeah, I mean, I'm sensing it's like a slap shot kind of a...
Slapshot
Okay.
meets Porky's
Okay.
meets Blazing Saddles.
Okay, all right. Keep working it.
Well, that's it. And then they win the cup and they melt it down and sell it at a pawn shop.
Oh, okay. They don't... Okay.
I mean, we're going for like the racial jokes. We're going for the, we're going to, do all kinds of weird things. But it's just in pre-production.
Okay.
And I've also got another movie called Jackass to Mouth, which is about stunt work in the world of porn.
Let's get back to... I think we were talking about music and bands.
Piercy,
and when the lead singer...
The Boys.
When the lead singer, leaves a band.
I mean... And sorry for going off on that tangent. I'm just trying to make some money on this podcast. Thought there might be some investors listening.
There could be.
I mean, I do think with
Cast me in the movie if it
you're
gets
going
picked
to
up.
be the racist equipment manager.
Oh, great! I've always wanted to be an equipment manager.
And your name's going to be Earl Skakel. I'm gonna take the hit.
Okay.
Well, in Rat's case, I think Jizzy Pearl. It just didn't. He was like trying to impersonate Piercy, dumb down his vocals and it just didn't work for me. It's nothing against him. It's like.
But like Vince left Motley Crue. You can't do Motley Crue without Vince.
Right. And John Corabi, whose vocals are 100 times better than Vince Neil, it just didn't work.
Right.
It was, because I don't think anyone listens to Motley Crue, to hear good vocals or Rat. Or, we were talking about Kiss. I mean, I don't think, Eric Singer and Tommy Thayer are, in my opinion, technically 100 times the musicians that Ace and Peter are, especially at this point. I mean, Ace is pretty sloppy, and it does, in most people's minds, it just doesn't work. It's not Ace and Peter.
Well, you don't go to Kiss though to critique the performance. You go to Kiss to have a great time. It's a party. I mean, really, that's what it is. It's a Broadway show combined with a concert. It's everything. It's a party. It's just it's spring break. It's everything all rolled into one. I think the one band that people like to point to though is Van Halen, right? David Lee Roth leaves the band. Sammy comes in. They made some great music. But to me, it wasn't Van Halen. It was a different band. I don't know what you would call it, but it wasn't Van Halen. Van Halen to me was always David Lee Roth. Ain't Talking About Love, that is Van Halen to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Van Hagar, I guess, was a lot of the...
Yeah, they use that term.
I mean, I like that era of the band, but yeah, I mean, it just wasn't raw. They may have even outsold the Van Halen era, like
Sure.
the Roth era. But
Well, they made more albums, so I mean, I hope they would have outsold them, right?
But I'm nuts. I actually like the album with Gary Sharon, but that's
Then you are nuts.
that's sacrilege to say.
Most people listening don't even remember that took place.
Well, I don't think Gary Sharon remembers it took place. He was out of the band so fast. But
How many weeks was that?
I think after the tour, they did a show at the Charlotte, wherever the Hornets used to play, like 18,000 seat arena, and it was like 2,500 people there. It was like,
Sounds about right though for that lineup.
this isn't working.
Yeah.
But I can, it's like, it's a bummer to, technically he has the best voice of anyone who's ever sang in Van Halen. But, it gets to the point we're trying to make, I guess, of it ain't David Lee Roth.
But see, take it to the flip side. Like a lot of people say that about Guns N' Roses. I don't want to go see GNR because it's Axl and a bunch of his friends. I think I can understand that and I can respect that, but you have to reconcile in your mind the fact that it's a different group and that they're going to play different music as well. And you're not getting the quote unquote full experience of Slash and, everybody else being there, but it still is pretty cool to see Axl up on stage performing, especially after being gone for such a long time. Let me ask you this question though. I've stated this many times through the years on Twitter. I firmly believe that there is no band out there, and this includes even when it would have been possible a couple years ago to pull Led Zeppelin together and have them do a tour. I don't think there's any band that you could put back together right now and tour that would gross more money in North America than GNR. I think it would be the biggest tour of all time.
Oh, they could play the Coliseum.
They would play stadiums everywhere. I mean, it would be, they could sell out arenas for weeks on end. It would be, right? I mean, do you agree? It would be the
absolutely.
biggest selling tour of all time. It would be ridiculous.
You'd have to get Adler back in the fold. And, I used to live in the same building as Steven Adler, and he was such a sweet guy, but he was out of his mind. Asking me for $10 every time I saw him. It's like, I don't know a lot about publishing and the music business, but you drummed on Appetite.
Yeah, right.
How about you give me $10?
Yeah, you drummed on the biggest record of the last 30 years.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, and it's not like the EP. I guess he bowed out after the EP.
Lies.
Right, he was on that, and like that didn't exactly undersell. I mean, that is like, and it was so sad. And I saw him a couple years later. He gets out of a limo and he's like, "Hey, Earl, what's happening?" I'm like, "Hey, Steve." He's like, "Where are you living these days?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know. I moved." And a couple hours later, show's ending. We were seeing Glam Nation, which was a 70s tribute band that Eric Singer was in, and Derek Sherinian was on keyboards. It was Eric Dover was the singer.
Eric Dover is amazing. What a great voice that guy has.
Oh, I told him after that show, I'm like, "Dude, you're a star." And so after the Glam Nation show's over, Steven's getting back into his limo. He's like, "Earl, do you need a ride home?" I'm like, "Well, where do you live?" He's like, "I live in the same building you do." I was like, "Well, 2 hours ago, you just told me you moved." And then I love Steven Adler because he's such a good person. Like,
yeah.
He comes from such a great place. Like, I saw him at the Slash concert at the Wiltern because my friend Brent Fitz, who's a great drummer, is Slash's drummer. And Steven's sitting right next to me, and I could tell he was bummed out because Brent's so good. And he was like, "Wow, that's how I used to play." And then he's like, "Hey, Earl, let's go back home." I'm like, "I don't live there anymore." He's like, "Well, I love living there. I jack off in that building every day." And
That's a great story.
That is like something you don't get from most normal people.
No.
"Hey, how's my old apartment building?" "I still jack off there every day." Great.
Did you ever see him on Celebrity Rehab?
Oh, it was pretty bad.
Talking about missing his friend Slash. I mean, it really tugs at the heartstrings. I mean, you could just see how sad the guy really is. He really is sad.
Yeah. Well, I think and I saw it on a daily basis. It was a great insight. Just the group of friends he was hanging with was just these fucking losers and these posers, and to bring it back to kind of Kings related, this building, no one lives there anymore, so I don't think I'm outing them. It's on Century Park East and Olympic. Bruce McNall lived there.
Oh wow!
Right before he went to prison. And that was really sad because here's this guy who's responsible for Gretzky coming and making hockey the number one sport in this city for a very long time. I mean, I remember going to a Hartford Whalers game on a Tuesday night, sold out. It's like, wow.
Now, wait a minute. You, Bruce McNall, and Steven Adler all lived in the same building.
And Faye Resnick, who was very heavily involved in the O.J. Simpson murder situation, because if you remember, some of O.J.'s supporters were saying that OJ didn't do it. It was drug dealers who went to that condo to kill Faye Resnick because so it was just a crazy building.
Wow.
And
that's what you should be making a movie about.
Right. It's Century Park East. Just
there you go.
Sitcom.
Well, I don't know if it'd be a sitcom.
It would be just on Adler alone. I mean, my favorite Adler story is one, and the black security guards loved him. Okay. They had no idea who he was.
Which is even better.
They just, because their love for him was just genuine.
Right. He's just Steven. We just love that guy, Steven.
Yeah, he was Steven to them. They did not listen to Guns N' Roses. And one night, Steven's running through the hallway naked, going, "They're in there, they're in there." And this is a kind of a hoity-toity building, a lot of not rich people, but well-off people. And the security guards grab me, "Hey, Steven's going nuts. We know he likes you. Will you go up there with us?" So I go up there, and they're like, "They're fucking in there. They're in there." And so is me and the two black security guards. We go into Steven's apartment, and there's no one in there. But, let's just say some paraphernalia. Mm-hmm. And I think he got a bad batch.
Right.
On Pico and Hoover. And it was just kind of sad that, wow, this guy's in the biggest band, or was in the biggest band of all of that era. And it's like, what are you doing?
Right.
You're in a hallway naked with me and two black security guards.
Right.
Your life you've definitely made a left turn.
Right. For sure. I'm telling you, this is a book or a movie right here. This is gold.
And Bruce McNall.
And there have to be hundreds more of these stories.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
so this is your book and this is your movie deal right here.
Bruce McNall driving up a beat up Ford Explorer. It's like, this is a guy who was in like a Lamborghini Countach, 6 months ago.
Right.
So
have you ever met Bruce? Well, I mean, besides back
briefly,
then, Bruce is honestly, genuinely the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah. I mean,
he's just so humble, just a nice guy.
I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about him. I mean, to me, he's everything that was good and bad about the Kings of that era. I mean, it's, obviously we got to see an amazing time in LA sports history. The greatest player, arguably still in somewhat of his prime, just
doing his thing on a nightly basis. I mean, that's really awesome.
I don't think I still appreciate it. This is maybe the greatest team sports athlete ever, and that's saying something when you consider Michael Jordan and other great athletes in their sports. And Bruce McNall was the guy responsible for getting him here. But then, because of his financial impeccadillos, let's just say, we were bankrupt for almost 6-7 years. And
have you read his book?
I did not.
It's a great book. You definitely should read it. Gives you some insight into him as a child and kind of how he got involved with the coin business and the horse business and stuff like that. And it also really tells the backstory as well about kind of pre-Staples Center, because a lot of people like to believe that Staples Center is the house the Lakers built, which couldn't be further from the truth. It is the house that the Kings built. Bruce McNall was in the process of building a new arena prior to going to jail. And one of the deals when he went to sell the team basically was he wanted to make sure that the group that he sold it to was going to be able to put a new building together. That was one of his hopes. And one of his biggest regrets is when he sold to Cohen and Sudikoff, you're laughing. Yeah. Is basically he said that there was a better deal on the table, I believe it was with Sony, that would have ensured that the building was to be built, but that he made more money off of the other deal, and he needed money at the time, and he really regretted that because in his mind, his what's the phrase I'm looking for? His legacy was going to be having that new building built because he knew that the Forum was on the way out. They had talks about building it across the street near Hollywood Park. They had looked at some different locations and whatnot. He's really happy ultimately, of course, that AEG came in. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you love these kind of stories, so I'll share it with you. He's in jail the whole time, right? And the reason they didn't retire Gretzky's number for as long as they did was because Wayne refused to have his number retired at Staples Center until Bruce was out of jail. And Bruce didn't know that while he was in jail. Even though Wayne went to visit him, Luke went to visit him, they never talked about it or anything like that. And so Bruce found that out later when he was he attended, I guess, the night that they retired the jersey, and Wayne told him that night, and Bruce was pretty blown away by it, to say, I can't even believe that Wayne would think that highly of me, to do this. But the other thing that happened is just a couple of days after, and Bruce came on my show a couple of years ago and told the story, and it was awesome. A couple of days after he got out of jail, he was living in like a halfway house or whatever, and Tim Leiweke called him up, said, I'd like to bring you down, I'd like to show you. He sent a car over, picks him up, and brings him to Staples Center. And basically, Leiweke, who was the head of AEG, walks him around the entire building and explains all kinds of things, aspects of the building. Bruce had never seen it. He didn't know the renderings. He didn't know anything because it all happened after he went to jail. And Leiweke basically told him, this is your legacy. This is the building that's here because of you. You laid the groundwork, 2 owners before us. And Bruce was just really touched by the fact that Leiweke always rolled out the red carpet for him. When a lot of other people turned their back on Bruce, Tim always respected what Bruce, did for the organization. Because first and foremost, Leiweke was a hockey fan.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I have mixed feelings on McNall, I'm sure he's not as bad as people portrayed him to be, but there's some responsibility of what happened.
Well, there certainly is responsibility. I mean, he went to jail because he, was able to get money out of people, illegally. So there definitely is some responsibility there. At the same time, he did a lot of great things for, other people. And that's why guys like Robitaille and Gretzky and stuff stood by him, through all those years.
And he okayed the GM at the time to bring in Troy Crowder and Michel Petit, 2 of my favorite Kings. I mean, I literally got an erection in Northridge when I was in the car. And this is, hockey was so big at that point in L.A., they would give radio reports on Kings transactions, and the Kings today signed number 55, Troy Crowder. I'm like,
go figure.
So, that was kind of a weird era for the Kings. I mean, when McNall's stuff was kind of starting to surface, it was like they were like bringing, Barry Melrose was like bringing in guys like Phil Crow, Mark Potvin,
Rob Cowie.
Yeah, I mean, Phil Crow had never played pro hockey. He was just a ECHL tough guy. Crowder had been out of hockey for 4 fucking years, but I loved it because they were just stacking the tee with all these monsters, and it was, King games were fun to go to.
It was a great time back then. Things turned really dark in the city of Los Angeles, I'd say around 97, 98, soon after Gretzky had left, right? And ownership became even more questionable, until AEG really came in and then, brought out the New Jersey, made the announcement that downtown was going to happen and kind of set things in the right direction. And then the trade for Palffy kind of really cemented that. I think that the team was back headed in the right direction from there. I mean,
I didn't like Melrose toward the end, because I thought, the Grant Fuhr trade, which I thought, McMaster gets blasted for that trade. But if you look at it, I thought it was Melrose totally mismanaging Fuhr. That one stretch where he played him 5 games in a row, he was like awesome. Mm-hmm. And Fuhr was never a backup goalie. And, I think Melrose made that trade so he could fuck with Kelly Rudy's head, like, oh, we're going to bring in this guy. And it's like, that was when he was in those Tony Robbins commercials. And I don't know. I didn't think, we got Philippe Boucher and, of course, the great Denis Sigurov. I mean, if you watch Denis Sigurov's last game as a King, you can hear him fall off the face of the earth. What happened to that guy? But, it's so, I mean, listen, I know we're well over the hour mark. I know you got to go back to Staples Center.
Game 4. Big game tonight.
Well, it's, one game. You were right. It really is every cliche, but they're cliches for a reason. It's one. Mike Richards was on, and that's the last thing. If we could, do you have a minute to?
Let's do it.
He's really an enigma to me right now because this guy's making $6 million a year. I could tell. I'm a great observer. I play this dumb character, Mayor, but I'm a real observer in life, and I could tell he is not happy being on the 4th line.
You think?
And I think the fans aren't happy because it's like you're making a lot of money, and I don't think most 4th line centers are making close to $6 million a year. I mean, do you think? 2 questions for you. How is this going to affect him short term, his play in terms of tonight and the rest of the playoffs, hopefully, and next year when it's like,
Well, let me say a few things about that. First of all, I think that next year, for the lineup for the Kings, including Mike Richards, there are a lot of questions to be answered, and I think that we could do a whole podcast just on that come summertime, because once the playoffs are over, I think there are a lot of questions on defense and among the forwards as well. We're still in a salary cap era. Even though the salary cap is going to go up, there aren't a lot of great unrestricted free agents that are available that are out there in terms of defensemen this particular summer. So in order to shore up that defense that we talked about earlier, they're going to have to make some hockey trades. And in order to make hockey trades, you have to be able to give up some key roster players. They're only, there's a finite amount of young talent that you can swing, like they were able to do to get Mike Richards. They traded Braden Shin and Wayne Simmons. So you really have to look at that roster and kind of figure out, okay, who truly is part of the core of the team. Doughty, Kopitar, Quick, etc., and who are maybe some players like a Justin Williams that are probably going to be traded. I think there are a lot of questions that start to be asked over the summer once the playoffs are over. That would be my long-term answer. Is I don't think it's really a Mike Richards question as much as it is an overall question about the direction of the team, because I don't think there's a quick fix to it, because you can't just sign an unrestricted free agent defenseman. If maybe Dan Girardi from the Rangers had gone to free agency, then there would have been a quick fix, but there's not. And so when you start to make those hockey trades, I think there's a domino effect that encompasses 25 players or more, because you're including prospects in there as well. In terms of short term, I'll say this. Mike Richards hasn't produced this year. It's been a down year for him. He's not the only one. There are a number of players that have had down years, including the captain, Dustin Brown. That being said, at the junction they're at right now, they need to generate offense. They need to play better defense. And Richards has had a real tough time with the bigger size and speed of the guys on the San Jose Sharks, their top players. So I think that for that particular reason, it makes sense to put him down on the 4th line. I mean, you could argue and let him play on the 3rd line and say Stoll's your 4th line. If you really want to be Darryl Sutter, he's going to say, well, Mike's not on the 4th line, because he factors in the fact that Richards is going to get on the power play, and 4th line guys don't play on the power play. So he will get more minutes than than a normal fourth line center. But really, it has to do just with the makeup of that team. Is that Jared Stoll is the consummate third line center. So where else do you put Richards? You could hide him off on the wing if you thought that he was going to give you some offense, but he's not generating offense, and he's not doing it as a second line center. Personally, I really like what they're doing tonight with the second line. I like having Carter. Normally, I prefer Carter at wing because you want, on a team that starved for offense, you want him just shooting the puck out there on the wing. But tonight, you have to take advantage of Toffoli. You have to take advantage of Pearson, some young guns. We've seen a lot of other teams work young players into the lineup, including the Sharks. Look at Tomas Hertl and a bunch of other guys. The Kings have to take advantage of all this this depth they have with young players like Toffoli, like Pearson, and get them into the lineup and get them producing, because it comes down to depth, and it's not about how many goals Mike Richards has. It's about how many goals the depth players have, and the depth guys haven't been doing it for the Kings in the playoffs thus far this year. That's what helped them win in 2012. That's what helps a lot of other teams win. Anaheim is winning because of it. Dallas is now winning because of it. The Kings need to win because of their depth players.
I'm a huge Mike Richards fan, but I think this year Michael Richards from Seinfeld had a better year. But now I want to leave the episode on a cliffhanger of note, because we've talked about who's going to be back, who's not going to be back. This is where I stand in terms of. Do you have like 2 minutes?
Do it, yeah, of course.
I'm assuming I love Gaborik, so I hope he's back. I'm assuming Green and Mitchell aren't back on defense, and forward wise, you mentioned Justin Williams, so there are some guys who won't be here next year. Unless this team goes on an incredible run and wins the cup again. But even then, I
think even then, when you look at the salary cap, and when you look at kind of, back to what we were talking about earlier, Lombardi and the boxes and how things fit together, Tyler Toffoli has to play top 6 minutes. He's not a bottom 6 player. To play top 6 minutes on the LA Kings, he does have to take over for Justin Williams. There really isn't another spot for him. In terms of Gaborik, Lombardi traded for him for one reason. He believed that he was a long-term piece to the LA Kings. He didn't think that he was a rental player like some of the other guys, Camilleri, Vanek, Molson, who he thought were just going to be worried about getting to July 1st and cashing in with another team. Gabrik's wanted to play in Los Angeles. They talked with his agent. They talked with him before the trade. Columbus gave them that option to do that, and Lombardi believes that Gaborik wants to sign here. So barring a major change in direction, which is possible but not probable, I certainly think that Gaborik is going to re-sign. Matt Green and Willie Mitchell, as you mentioned earlier, probably not, unless there's a 1 year at $1 million type deal. It's not something that fits in. They do have Braden McNabb, the kid they picked up from Buffalo, who they believe over the last 2 seasons has been the best defenseman not playing in the National Hockey League. So look for him to be in the lineup next year as a replacement for one of those 2 guys we just talked about. And
my last question to you, and I was a little shocked at this at the deadline, and I'm just standing up to stretch out my old legs. Okay. I got the impression that, basically it was a 3-horse race between Gaborik, Molson, and Vanek. I think Vanek was definitely, was not really, he was the third choice by far, just because he seems to have been honest and said, I'm going to free agency.
Are you talking about for the Kings?
Yeah, for the Kings. But it seemed like Molson didn't have a lot of interest in playing here, and given his connection to Quick and his connection to this team, do you think he was just like burnt bridges from being traded? Or I was surprised he kind of was like, yeah.
The way I heard it was that the Kings were not interested in any of the 3 players we've talked about. They weren't interested in Cammy, Molson, or Vanek, and starting with the fact that all 3 of them probably weren't going to re-sign here, and Lombardi has a kind of a philosophy about not being into rental players. If you wanted just a quick version of it, the Kings management team really doesn't care for Mike Camilleri. They don't believe that Matt Molson cares for the LA Kings, and Thomas Vanek, like you said, they believed was going to free agency, and the prevailing thought is he's going to sign in Minnesota, or maybe now he's fallen in love with his new team, but the thought was he was going to sign in Minnesota. So those 3 players were really off the grid. Lombardi had been in on Gaborik since January, and we had been reporting that the Columbus Blue Jackets were heavy in terms of sending scouts and their assistant GM to Manchester to scout guys that were there for many, many months leading up to the deadline. So he was all in on Gaborik offensively. Keep in mind, though, the number one thing that Lombardi wanted to get at the trade deadline was a defenseman. It wasn't a forward. He just couldn't swing a deal that made sense hockey-wise for a defenseman. Well,
listen, this is why I had you on the show. You're an amazing talent. where can people find you on Twitter?
At Mayor NHL. You can also read the website, mayorsmanor.com. Earl, it's always awesome hanging out with you. We didn't even get to talk UFC. We have to come back and do some MMA talk next time.
Real fast, and I know as I'm wrapping up at UFC, Jones Teixeira, does Teixeira have any chance? I think he does.
I think he does. I mean, right, because he's a big, heavy puncher, so he has a chance. But John Jones right now is just in a class above everybody else. I think that Jones wins that fight. And if you want to fast forward a little bit, I think really the card to look forward to is the July 4th card. You have the triple main event, if you will. Chris Weidman going to get up against Machida. A lot of people inside mixed martial arts, the insiders, if you will, they think that Machida has a real good chance of beating Chris Weidman. I'm not convinced of that. Ronda Rousey, biggest star in the industry right now. She's going to be fighting on that card, fighting Alexis Davis. That's going to be great. And, of course, the guy with the best mouth in all of MMA, Chael Shonen's going to be on that card as well, fighting Vanderlei Silva if he shows up.
Well, he will.
There's a lot of talk that Vanderlei is going to somehow have an injury the last week or so we'll see.
Well, I think because a lot of people don't realize that that Nevada is definitely the toughest state in terms of steroid situations. TRT now they've banned, and let's be honest. If you look at some of those Pride tapes, Vanderlei was, as they say in the business, on the sauce. Yeah, so I don't know if he'll be able to pass a test in America.
Oh, well, come on. Vanderlei's fought in Vegas plenty of times since leaving Pride. So if he wants to, he could. I think the guy that would have had the bigger issue would be Vitor Belfort. And of course, he's not fighting Chris Weidman anymore. And that's why Lyoto moved in there. But a lot of great stuff happening with UFC. You have this card, and then you have the Memorial Day weekend card happening up in Vegas as well. You have the show coming up in Vancouver. Some great younger, lighter weight fighters fighting as well. So big stuff happening for UFC.
And a shout out to him. He's not my boy, because I don't know him, but Fabricio Verdum, I don't care. They're already making excuses. Brown broke his foot in the first round. Well, you know what? It's fucking. What's Verdum supposed to do? Sit there and okay, just hit me.
Well, I will say definitely a shout out to Verdum, because in my wildest dreams I would have never expected Fabricio Verdum to beat Fedor, and I would have never expected him to beat Travis Brown. I would have expected Brown to KO him. That was the prediction I had out there, and pretty shocked. Injury to Brown or not, pretty shocked that Fabricio Verdum had such crisp stand up. His striking looked unbelievable in that fight.
Well, Fedor is my all-time favorites. I cried during that fight, but I think after the after the Verdum fight against Overeem, where he was basically mocked for having no punching ability, and really his only strategy was to try and sucker Overeem to get on the mat, and Overeem was like, suck.
The Jeremy Horn strategy against Chuck Liddell.
Yeah, right. Just like I loved it. There was one point Verdum and Overeem where Verdum just falls on the ground and he's motioning. Right. Over him. Please come down here.
Yeah, Jeremy Horn did that for 4 rounds, or what felt like 4 rounds against Chuck Liddell.
Well, we're going to have you. I mean, you can come back anytime you want. I know in all seriousness, I know we've joked around a lot. I've always wanted you on the show. I was almost embarrassed to ask you because I know your schedule's so busy. And
anytime, Earl, anytime.
You are the best. So please go to the Mayor's Manor. What's the Twitter one more time?
Mayor NHL.
This guy's the best. Hands down, the real deal on hockey and music, and he's a great friend. Inappropriate Earl, we're on SoundCloud, and for you Steve Jobs nut swingers, you can still go on iTunes and support the Apple giant. This is going to air today, so this is maybe the first episode that's ever been current, and we will see you soon. Thank you, guys.